Hello, it's Aarnimetsa from PokerEyemania.com, and today we are going to do some regular speed 6 maxes. Last week we did some regular speed 9 maxes, and I think that the structure is great, the players are great, so what's not to like? In this bottom left corner I'm only going to flat because this guy seems to be so needy, especially when it's about a 6 max game. A guy that plays 9/3 from 32 hands is going to be really tight. Like you should expect that the general opponent is somewhere around. I think even the Yannick Rocky's 21/20 is probably going to be on a. It's going to be stats of a really multi-tabling reg, but somewhere around 25/25 is going to be what I think is going to be quite optimal. And when I'm saying that how this guy needs to be so really tight, then we can see that he opened from UTG with Queen 10 off, so just a word of reminding. When you are having just about 30 hands on a player, there might still be some wonkiness in the stats. And I started off with an intro because it makes it easier for Deja to cut for YouTube. In 6 max games it's going to be, because in 9 max games you are going to be in the blinds about once in every 4.5 hands, when it's going to be 9-handed. But in these games you are going to be in the blinds like 1.5 times more often, so you need to be more apt to stealing and also more apt to defending your own blinds. In this situation, I think with 9 queen suited, even though we are out of position, it's going to be a hand that we are quite aware where we are, and we should be ahead of a general button opener's range. I know that this guy is not a general button opener, but still I think that we are going to be ahead of his range. And when he checks the flop, I'm quite apt to trying to steal the pot away from on the turn, and I don't actually think that the ace matters that much. I think it's going to be harder for him to be calling with something small, and I wasn't expecting him to have an ace there. In here, with the king pair and the great kicker, we are going definitely for value. There's also always a good question that when something doesn't work, please explain in a bit more detail how it doesn't work. We are actually a bit screwed because this is Colin Moshman and he should be good. And when he should be good, I'm thinking that this is either a flush draw or it's going to be something ridiculously strong as like a set. If it's a flush draw, it's going to be a strong hand anyway. And it's going to be a set or it's going to be a flush draw. And against the flush draw, we are having way better equity than against a set. And that's something that we definitely need to write a note about. I think I might have done that against him before. And that's actually... And that's actually something that I played pretty badly, because I don't think that his game made that much sense. And that's actually pretty bad to say about someone that I think is going to be well above average in these games and is going to be a good player. And that's probably something that he's doing because it doesn't make so much sense to me, because I'm thinking that people are folding way too often. But also when it looks like a flush draw, and it would be pretty stupid for me to fold against a flush draw. And even when general opponents are also shoving weak kings, it's probably he's going to get enough calls for those that he's going to mainly check shove for value. And actually renoting it a bit. And like he shoves like over 4 times the pot. That's a real overbet in sit and go situations. Normally in sit and goes we are going to be betting way smaller. Betting way smaller, and I think a general bet size in sit and goes is going to be around half pot, or even a little bit smaller. So the general bet sizing is usually pretty small when we are playing with small effective stack sizes. It probably makes sense to have a generally a bit higher bet sizing at the beginning of sit and goes, and when the effective stack sizes are higher. But on late game it works really well when you are betting a bit smaller, and you are getting cheap pots stolen. And Markus Y asks that, what do you think about that overbet? I'd have to say that against a reg, as my first idea was that it doesn't make that much sense. But probably Colin Moshman is doing it because he's getting insane value out of it. In here, even though we have a medium pair and our opponent bet into us, I think that we are still calling, and it's going to be profitable to call, because, and on the river, if he bets third time, I would not be calling anymore, because I don't think that the general opponents in these games are going to 3-barrel as a bluff that often. But when there are opportunities to semi-bluff and bluff for 2 barrels, I think that's going to be more likely in these games. But like when Colin Moshman overbets it so highly, and I think that he's playing something like 30 tables, I think it's going to be something that it might work once, it might work twice, but after that it's going to be a competent reg should make notes, and when a competent reg makes notes on Colin Moshman that he does that, then it should be pretty bad if he doesn't balance it at all. And I think that's a spot that's going to be hard to balance. And in here, when Rocket Steve, actually that's a bit of an interesting hand as well. In here, we have a limper that bets. I think with King High, we are actually, our relative value of our hand is going to be higher than it seems. We are only having King High, but our opponent has limped and we have given him a perfect opportunity to bluff. So I think that our King High might be a lot stronger in here than it would look like. And the opponent had limped a pair of jacks there and then just min-bet it all the way through. That's going to be something that's really interesting, and I would love to play against Lena later on as well, so I'll mark him or her. And that's also an interesting point to note, that never give up. Never give up on when you are seeing that Colin Moshman did fall to somewhere around 60 chips after he lost the all-in against me. And when he lost the all-in against me, now he's back at about 900 chips, so never give up. You can always restore your chip sizes. And as Marcus Weiss said, that's another good way to play jacks. Good thing I'm making notes. That's actually something that's probably going to be a good place to note myself. I think with ace-9 against general opponent that might be a reg. That hasn't done anything stupid and his stats look quite solid for the early game. I think defending with ace-9 is going to be the most logical choice. It depends a bit on what do we think, and when we are hitting an ace, even against... I don't like that the flush draw fills up, but I don't think that we are going to have an opportunity to fold this. There might be some tens in his range, and there will be some tens. But there should be some bluffs. There shouldn't be many flushes. And there should be some weaker aces, even though there are not a lot of weaker aces. And then there are like super nuts that our opponent hits trips and also a flush draw on the flop, and that's something unexpected. Well, always expect the unexpected. And Kaleon, yeah, I thought that Akramon, I have seen the nickname before and the stats looked pretty solid, so I think I have read his blog on another poker forum, so I'm marking, like, we are having some information on our opponents. Like, our opponents are not complete unknowns. Because we are having information on our opponents, like, if we are knowing that the opponent is someone famous, if he writes a blog somewhere, if he's a professional poker player, you might have stumbled upon the nicks before. But also when we are playing these games, we are finding out the players that we are willing to play against. And in these games it's going to be, when it's about 6 max, it's going to be about stealing blinds, about not getting your blinds stolen too often. And Callan says table 1 ace-9 turn is pretty close and shoving would probably be better than flatting in my opinion. That was probably the hand that I was against the queen 10 suited. I actually agree with you that on the turn when we are only left with 1/3 of a pot on the river, it would probably make more sense to shove on the turn. But I think that it's going to be close. I'm having some more tables on the side, and I think that when I'm having some more tables on the side, that is going to be too much, because 6 max games when we are having plenty of stack depth are taking a lot of mental thought. And chip leader, as Moshman is 30 tabling, I'm thinking that he's not adjusting that much to me, but he's probably having as a general strategy to overbet shove. Overbet shove very strong hands in certain textures. It's going to be interesting in this situation, but when Rocket Steve has min re-raised, I'm thinking that the min re-raise, it's less strong than a shove there. That would be probably the size to 3-bet with that kind of a stack size. But I think it's going to be stronger than just a call. And Calleon, I agree with you that if we are having an opponent that's a reg, then we are having a lot more pressure on the turn, as it doesn't, as you say, that it doesn't make that much sense to, and that's not that common spot to bluff. And value betting pretty much anything that we beat, so our hand, even though it's a pair of aces, essentially it's a bluff catcher. So that's a spot that I'm playing way differently when I'm against a player that I think it's not going to be a reg, than when I'm thinking that our opponent is going to be a reg. And as you see that I'm going to do some distinctions quite quickly. I think that when players are a lot off, it doesn't require more than something like 20 to 30 hands to see that the players are likely players that I want to play more against. And Colin Moshman again. That's going to be pain in the ass. We are getting such good odds in here. And in general, I'm thinking that Colin Moshman plays. What I'm remembering that he's playing quite needy in general, even though my stats, I probably haven't been playing against him. I probably haven't been playing against him in ages, like not in a year, because my HUD is filtering for stats from only this year or for the last year. So I haven't played against Colin Moshman in a year, but I remember that he was among the more needier grinders in the games. That sucks against Colin Moshman, Because basically only hands that it makes sense are pocket kings, pocket jacks and ace king. But those are just... they're going to be so tiny part of his range, but... but like nothing else makes sense. I think. And that's like... that's the absolute top of my range that I'm going to fold in that situation. I just don't think that... especially when when I don't think that we should think about what he saw that we did when he's 30 tabling. And then there is Scaleon and Marcus YR. Would it be better to check the turn on the King Queen hand? Obviously, I just thought that it's going to be... I thought as my first idea that it's going to be nasty with so many draws, giving our opponent free cards. And when he checks, I thought that he's going to mainly be weaker in that spot. And going for a bet turn and shove river is going to be too thin. In the spot that we are betting the turn, we still don't have to shove the river. We can, when we are having position, we are still having an opportunity to evaluate some rivers. And that's, in a sense, that's a spot that when we are getting into a really nasty situation, we are in a really nasty situation and we are making a really nasty fold that feels really bad. I think that those are the situations that it's really easy to be really hard on yourself, but I don't think actually that I don't think that it's going to... that there is going to be so big of a difference between betting and between checking the turn. I think right now that checking the turn is probably better. And if he checks the river, then value betting the river is a lot less thin, and we are probably getting one street of value. And we are going to... if we are checking the turn and the river is going to be something like Queen of Diamonds, we are going to be hating life a bit more, or 10 of Diamonds. But those are the situations that pretty much either option, there are going to be situations where you are going to feel bad. And especially if you are getting really screwed. I'm thinking that Colin Moshman's, actually that's probably a hand that would be pretty interesting to calculate out later on the blog or somewhere. And that's actually something that I will do. Because that's going to be an interesting hand for sure. Yannick Crocky seems solid. it's going to be another situation. Because of this Dave Porto, I'm thinking that he's going to be calling too much in those situations, and there are going to be plenty of call folds in his range. But against his 3-betting range, I don't think that we are actually going to have as much equity as we would want to with Ace-King. But also with this guy just flatting, if he's a reg but has just gotten certain cards, which is, like, it's really unlikely that Dave Porto is going to be a reg. It's going to look strong when he's only calling in a situation that it doesn't make that much sense to. And clear shove with King Queen, Ace King. And it's interesting spot with the dead money from the fish, and that's the reason. When he calls, then it's going to be easier than if it's only against this guy. When it's only against this guy, it's going to be a lot more thin. And still against this guy, I don't think our equity is going to be that great, and I don't think that we are getting any better hands to fold there. And a spot where small blind can have a decent bluffing range. I don't think, like, even though a general player can have a good player could have a decent bluffing range against an opponent that opens really wide. Against a player that opens really wide from cutoff, they could have a sizable bluffing range. But I think that in general, when players are tighter, they are not having as much as a bluffing range in those situations in general. But I think also that this guy is playing a lot of tables. It's going to be quite likely. This is going to be interesting because I think with the top pair we are going to be ahead of his small bet, and when he does a huge bet, then I'm going to think that it's going to be a really sizable amount of time. And now I have marked the hand with Colin Moshman, and I think I'm going to post it to my blog or post it to the hand analysis forums, because it's going to be an interesting hand anyways. Against a guy that seems to be folding a lot of his big blinds, I'm going to go really wide on a small blind situation. I think that's something that will give you plenty of chips in the long run and will give you plenty of equity in the long run. Like, these games are all about stealing those blinds and also making sure that your blinds are not going to get stealed as often. And in this, even if this guy opens from the UTG, it's going to be closer. It's going to be a closer spot because even from the UTG, players are opening in a 6-max game with a way wider range than in a 9-max game. Like, in these games, you should think about when someone opens from the UTG, when it's 5-handed, you should pretty much just cut the 4 first positions out of the out of the 9-max table and you should be thinking about what would a general player open from hijack and how is your hand playing against the general hand that players are opening from hijack. And there are going to be a lot of comparisons from 9-max to 6-max because I think that's going to be the main part. Main part in this because 9-max sit and goes are going to be the games that people are most aware of, so it makes sense to compare these games to those games. And against the reg that opens a lot, like against Colin Moshman, we could have called if Colin Moshman would have the 1200 chips. Actually, then it would be also really nasty because I think that he's going to. And in here, it's going to look like our hand is not much, but we are having a player opening from button that has been stealing really aggressively. So Queen 9 is going to be pretty no-brainer 3-bet in that situation. And in here we are going for min-raise call. I think that against even though he's 3-betting only 7.3% of the time, we have been raising against his big blind practically always, and it doesn't require such a high 3-bet percentage for it to be good for us to just go with ace-8. Ace-8 off, and I think it's going to be more profitable to induce with ace-8 than it's going to be shoving when we are still having 15 big blind stack depth. What do you think of calling Queen 9 off in table 3? Or is table 3 the top right table or the bottom left table? Apparently it's the bottom left table. What am I thinking about calling? Well, then we are playing a pot out of position and I need to be really quick on the $30 game. We missed out of most of our time bank because of thinking too much about the Colin Moshman's hand. I think in general that if we are 3-bet shoving here, we are guaranteed to make money against this kind of an opponent, and I think also it's going to be profitable to flat call, but it's going to have a lot more question marks and it's going to be a lot more nasty to play as a call with those stack depths and out of position. So I think that it's going to be better as a shove than as a flat call. It would also be interesting to actually that's also an interesting hand to go for it. Because this Ambreo is with the higher stack, we just can't shove, and min raising is a lot more icky with a hand like Queen 8 suited when there are two opponents that we practically need to call if they are shoving. And Audrius says that you should add HUD into the bottom of the window. Now I need to say that I just don't follow you at all. In these situations, actually, the HUD on the bottom of the window. In this top right game, now that we are against two fishy players, actually we should have bet even higher. Because I think that the two fishy players are going to give us value, and then we get 3 bets. Or then we get re-raised. Yeah. And when we get re-raised, that would actually probably have been a call, because there is a flush draw. Their opponent can be shoving with. It's only because when opponent is generally a bit more passive, then those opponents are not check raising without having something. So oftentimes it's only a question about, is there something stronger than a top pair weak kicker? And yeah, I'm going to find the stat explanation. Thank you, Audrey, for asking. Asking about the HUD explanations. I'm usually having it on the bottom of my screen, but as I have pretty much opened my computer completely up during the last few days, I didn't have it already in here. But I agree that it makes following the stream a lot easier. And the Queen 9 hand. Let's mark it as well. When we are opening from the small blind as a steal, in general I think that our opponents are going to, and in here we are against this Isildur party, and his range is going to be so wide that even though against a tight player it wouldn't make sense to re-raise, or actually defending might make sense even against a tighter player, but against a player like Isildur party, I think that King 10 off is going to be a really profitable shove. It's actually interesting. I haven't had any other stats on him than. But I think that Isildur party stats are looking pretty awesome. That he's stealing like a madman, but folding really often his own big blinds. So, and I think that looks pretty interesting in general. And in here, when we are having an overpair, we are just going for it against red-black, because there are so many worse hands that our opponent will have in his range in that situation. But unfortunately, he had pretty much the immortal nuts in that situation, so. Oh well. That's also a situation that we are having a player that we know that it's going to be generally loose passive, so when he's re-raising he usually has something. But in that situation I think that our opponent will be re-raising with about the same sizing if he's having top pair in that situation. And we are having just 7 hands on the G-Cone dog, and I think in general a general opponent is going to be folding with those stack sizes against the small blind raise so often that we should be way more active in stealing from small blind than Nash Equilibrium would dictate, because people in general are calling way less than Nash Equilibrium in those situations. How did the flop action go table 2? Table 2, it was a pot of 600 chips. Opponent checks, I bet 300. He min re-raises me, and he left. We are left with something like 1,000 chips behind, so. This is going to be somewhat of a more interesting situation. I don't think that ace deuce is going to be decent enough hand to raise call against Isildur party. If he flats, we are out of position and our hand is going to be pretty bad. So I think that the best equity play in that situation is going to be a shove, even though we are having 14 big blinds, but. And Callan said that just thinking whether calling makes more sense or not. I think that in that situation it was only because the opponent is. I think that when opponent is having pretty much anything, like he's having 4, 5, 5, any 5x hand, 3, 4. Generally, those hands that we are beating really well. I think that we are getting money in on the flop really often. And of course, when opponent has flat called pre-flop, it will cut his combos that he's going to hit that flop with, even when he's a random player. And Aarnimetsa asked that how's the results this year so far? I have probably played around 50 or 60 games in total. I have just been playing some test sets and the games that I played for the last coaching. I think I'm up somewhere around 300 or 400 bucks. I think ace deuce we are ahead of Colin Moshman's range in that situation. He should be calling, and we are enough ahead that even with ICM we should be shoving. And yeah, like as Callan says that ace deuce we are going to be min raising against needy players, and the problem was with Isildur party that we can't say that he's needy by any standards, so. And in here we can also see that Isildur party did flat call us with kings. That's pretty interesting. And as Callan said that there might be merit in keeping his bluffs in pot, I don't think that in that situation we are thinking that our opponent is capable of much bluffing. But I think he's capable in misreading his hand strength or relative hand strength in that situation. And actually when I'm thinking about it, when a general opponent calls in that situation, we are not seeing many hands, even though it's a general bad opponent that's calling, we are not seeing many hands that are going to hit that flop at all. So there should be stone cold bluffs in his range. And pocket threes, that's again on a situation that we can't raise call, or we can raise call against Isildur party, but we can't raise call against Mahahaha. So it's also a situation that with pocket trees, the hand is not playing well if we are seeing the flop, if our opponents are flat calling, so it's way better equity to shove than to play as a min raise. And we are on our final table for today. I thought that we are doing a quick run on the normal speed 6 maxes. 6 maxes this time around. When he's on the button, I think that our options are pretty much we are either 3-betting or we are flat calling in that situation. We should be well ahead of his range. And in here, I don't think that our opponent hits that flop pretty often. And I think that we are ahead with King Queen, even though we haven't hit anything. And there are opportunities that our opponent hits that flop, and he will hit that flop more often than we are hitting when we are defending. But I think in general, opponents are not having enough balls in general to, especially with an opponent like Art that seems to be, from the early game stats, as I remember, that he was quite needy, so I think that players in general are not having enough balls to go for 2 barrels or 3 barrels, so there will also be opportunities to bluff the pot to ourselves when we are seeing the later streets, even if we are not improving. And I think on the river, when we are betting ourselves after his turn check, we can even get some 5s or 3s that have hit that flop to fold, even if it wouldn't make sense if you are a capable, aggressive player yourself. And Aarnimetsa asked, sit and goes any different in 2015 than in 2013? I think sit and goes are going to be a lot tougher in 2015 than in 2013. And it's a result of spin-at goes. Like, spin-at goes did make all other sit and goes a lot tougher overnight. So if you have been like a break-even sit and go grinder on 2013 and you are using the same exact skills, I think you are losing money in the 2015 games. But if you are a big winner or have been a big winner on the 2013 games, I think that you are going to be a winner in the 2015 games as well. And also if you are compensating for the rise of general competition level in games by game selecting better. You can compensate the rise of general skill level in games, I think. And of course it's a bit different. It depends on how many tables you are playing that. How much difference does it make? If you are playing small amount of tables, I think you can still game select and your games might be just as soft as at 2013, but when you are rising up at stakes, I think that then you are. And King Queen off, it's going to be a value call in here. I would go to somewhere around King 8 off, probably against the player that I generally think is going to be a solid player. I think that the generally solid player is going to be shoving enough that it's going to be quite profitable for us especially as ICM isn't going to punish us that much when we are having the bigger stack. And in here we are, of course, we are raise calling in here against Art. We are raise going for it, even though this looks stronger and I've got a bad feeling about this. It's a bit nasty that I can't be playing as much of a min-raise game that I would want to, as both of these opponents are seeming to be pretty active with their 3-betting games, so it cuts out some of the spots that I think that would be profitable min-raises playing in a general sit-and-go bubble. But this time I think that I'm against two guys that it doesn't make that much sense to min-raise wildly in a 3-handed. And Calleon says that interesting 3-bet fold. It's actually going to be really interesting when I'm thinking about it more. Because our stack size was just around 12 big blinds. That's noteworthy. Actually, that's really noteworthy. I think it's going to be closer than you think if we are thinking about shoving with the ace-3 hand, because we should have a lot of fold equity because it's the bubble against this Jan Forik Rocky. But we have been playing like this is pretty much the only bubble that we have played against this Yannick Rocky. And our hands are mainly only about bubbles. And he has been pretty tame on the button, so I think he's already adjusting to the amount of pressure that we can inflict on him. So then we are not going to go for the tiniest edge of 3-bet shoves. And Calleon, I agree with you that he should be going for a smaller 3-bet size if using a non-all-in-one. And I think even going for a 4 big blind non-all-in 3-bet, I think it seems to be going for a 4 big blind non-all-in 3-bet. I'm still a bit unsure that if it's going to be big enough stack size for our opponent to be raise folding with a sensible range. And as I said at the beginning, never give up in these games. Even when the situation seems desperate, never give up. As long as we have chips, we are having hope. And hello, Kikalion. With King 10, if Art is shoving, Yannick Rocky is calling, then we need to be folding. But otherwise, even if he raises, Yannick Rocky shoves, we are going for it with King 10. There's just so little on top of our... But it's going to be interesting because it's a situation where where the value of your stack is going, or the value of the chips in your stack is going to be way less than the value of your ICM value in that situation if the opponents are shoving and calling. And Marcus Weiss said all you need is chips and hair, and too short hair apparently. Yeah, shouldn't be shaving my beard because then I'm running right. Like if I'm looking like a hobo, I run really well in the poker games that we are running. But if I'm shaving my beard and trying to look like a decent human being, then I'm running pretty crappily in these games, or at least that's what it feels like. Oh well. Oh well, these things happen. I think today it's going to be more interesting if I'm going to post the 2 hands that we are having today, post them on the hand analysis section and not analyze them on live stream, because I think both hands are going to require some more analysis than, and I think it's the teaching value is going to be higher on the forums than where you can participate a bit more easily than on live stream. And Callian says that so it would make sense to not shave for a whole year. Think about the run in December. Yeah, but I'm a bit unsure that can I live with a beard that would tickle my balls. That's what I'm afraid of. Even if I would run really, really well in poker games, then I would think that, does it make any... Is it worth it or not? And it's only I'm running good. The worse I look on stream, the better I run in games, but it's only when I'm live streaming. It's not working for the rest of the games. And chip leader, I didn't get that river bet with the king queen hand. The one where he donked the flop and you bet river. Let's see if I can find that hand easily. And that's practically, this is a situation that we don't need to think that much about what we are repping on the river. That's something. And I don't think that we are thinking about that much what we are repping on the river. We are thinking more that our opponent is pretty much, he's hitting this flop less often than it would seem. And as I told you during the stream, that players are making mistakes by not carrying on with their bets often enough, or they are not often enough following up with the second barrel when they are not having a good enough hand. So I think that general opponent in these games is going to, even if it would make sense for the opponents to still carry on betting most of their range on the turn, but shape their bets on the turn, especially on the turn, they should. This flop isn't going to be as wet as it looks, because it's quite unlikely that neither one of us has hit the board or is hitting the draws that there are on this board. So I'm thinking that we should be playing this board mainly as a dry board. And for it, I think it would make a lot of sense for a smart opponent to carry on with a plentiful range to do a turn c-bet in this situation. And the range should have the worst hands and it should have the best hands, and then there should be some of the showdown value like 5s and 3s that our opponent has hit, that he should have some of those. He should check mostly those and there should be also some of the worst hands that he's checking and check folding, but in general I think that our opponents are betting or are carrying on two barreling as a bluff often enough that it makes sense for me to call. And actually he's not donk betting here, he's c betting here, and I think that pretty many players are c betting a lot, but they are not following up on the turn that much. And as Callion said, that don't mind the river bet versus recreational player, and that's the point. If we are against a good player, and if you know that we are against a good player, then we are thinking more what we are repping. But if we are against recreational player, we are thinking less about what we are repping because our opponent is unlikely that he's going to be reading what we are repping that much, and recreational players are a lot more likely to only think about what is their hand strength, and then we can play against it when we are playing against their perceived range in this situation, and not thinking about that much what would our own range look like in their eyes. Does it make sense? It was a long tirade, but the answer is like, it doesn't matter what we are repping in a situation if our opponent is not trying to read what we are repping. And against a good reg should, as I said, he should carry on betting two streets more often, and also when he checks the turn, like when a recreational player or a player I think is going to be recreational or a weak reg, when that kind of a player is checking the turn, they are going to have a disproportionate amount of really weak hands when they are checking the turn. But if we are looking what a good reg would have as his range when he checks the turn, there are going to be hands with showdown value, and a really good reg would also, with those showdown value hands, like if we are betting this river against a really good reg, we would practically value on ourselves by betting here, because our opponent is pretty much calling with every hand that beats us, and he's going to be folding hands that we beat. And chip leader, I still think that he should have called a 3 or a 5. I think that against a player that's a relative unknown, I think that they are going to be folding 5s and 3s in this situation, even though they shouldn't. And I think that's also some part that pretty much doesn't make sense in poker. Because when you are thinking about poker as a game, you are using a lot of reflection. Like you are thinking that because you are knowing that this certain situation, it wouldn't make sense to play it in a different way. then also the opponents would know that it doesn't make sense to play it in a different way. But the problem is that the opponent is not you. And when the opponent is not you, you are not playing optimally against the opponents if you are using reflection, like what would you do in a certain spot. And even when my line doesn't make sense to me, it still might work as a bluff against other opponents, even if it doesn't work, even if it wouldn't work as a bluff against me. That's interesting also with Calleon that would take the line like that with some ace-7 suited, ace-5 type hand. I think like having a weak 7 or a strong 5 would make sense to bet as a value here. Because it's going to be really unlikely that our opponent would have a 10 after checking the turn, so they should be really strong. But also, if we are thinking that our opponent is going to be folding even some 5s and some 3s in here. Oh well, it's a really situation dependent hand, I'd say. But it's a more interesting hand than what you would think on the top of it. So, and it's a situation that it differs a lot when you are playing the same situation against a recreational player and when you are playing the situation against a really good reg. And I'm thinking that we are not planning to go through some hands today. I think that the hands are going to be on the forums, so this was only a hand that I know that this is going to be a quick one to talk about. But it's time to end today. So thanks for watching, especially thanks for chatting, because active chat is always going to be... It's always really nice. And really good comments on the chat. And I'm still looking for ideas for next week's session, so please put your ideas to my feedback thread on our forums, www.pokerimania.com/forum, and let's see you next week. If you are going to sleep, have a good night. If you are still playing poker, may this be a winning night for you. Bye!